Hello everyone, welcome back to Vitu Vidogo, a show that focuses on conversations anchored at improving the lives of hardworking citizens by offering them good services. And for good services, I mean reliable public systems. Today, we are going to talk about public transportation. Let us see how a society can function smoothly with public transit. Today, I'm going to take you step by step on how Canada has achieved on its huge mass of land to avail public transportation to its citizens. We are going to see how Canada, the Canadian government, has achieved that, and also how other provinces have done their part to serve their residents within the province. And we're even going to go lower, on a lower level, to see how other cities and municipalities have worked hard so that they can serve the people within their locality. So stay tuned and subscribe, share, and like this episode because this is going to be mind-blowing. I'll start with a brief history on Canada, and you'll see maybe a comparison with their Kenyan counterpart. Now, these two countries, they started off as ventures, company ventures. You see, in Kenya, we had the Imperial British East Africa Company, and here in Canada, at the time, it was known as the British North American. And these two, how they are similar is with time, in Kenya, they built a railroad. And at the time, they were calling it the Lunatic Express. It brought so much hullabaloo in London. You know, this was in the late 1800s. Why are we spending so much money in Africa, in some place we don't know, you know, because companies were lobbying for the government to send some money there so that they can build a railroad from the port of Mombasa, and it was to go all the way to today, modern day Kampala, Uganda. Now, come cross over the Atlantic Ocean and come to Canada. The same thing. These companies at the time, they wanted to put up a railroad. But you see, the difference was that from Kenya, and the difference here in Canada was the large size. You know, Canada is so huge. Canada is so huge. It's like more than 10 times the size of Kenya. And there were, at the time, these different provinces. You know, Canada was a bit fractured at the time. And to build this railroad, you know, from the east coast, the Atlantic side, and to go all the way to the west at the Pacific side, this railroad was more than 5,000 kilometers long. And to just, you know, to close in on my point was that how Canada was born, it was through this railroad, because the most western province of Canada, which is British Columbia, they only accepted, the only condition to join Canada was build us a railroad that links us from the Pacific coast to the east coast. And with that, we are going to join you. Now, on the other hand, in Kenya. This, at the time, it was not yet known as Kenya. It was British, East Africa. They wanted to get a colony there. So when they put up this railroad from Mombasa, not forgetting their drama there with the Lions of Savo, they built all the way to the most western part of Kenya. It's called Kisumu, is a city now. It borders Uganda. And it is when they built this rail line, they said, wait a minute. They could see the beautiful highlands of Kenya. And they said, hey, I think we should carve in a piece of this land for us. And that is how also Kenya came into being. So these two countries, you can see, they were birthed by the rail line, so to speak. Well, a thing to note as well is that at the construction and the height of the construction of these railroads in these two countries, in Kenya and in Canada, the locals, or the natives, did not have the capacity to, help build this or give any meaningful or skilled labor. So these companies, they had to go and get skilled labor from elsewhere. In Kenya, it was the Indians from India, because now this is Canada and North America. Sometimes you may talk about Indians and you may confuse them with the natives. But here we respectfully refer to them as the First Nations, because they were here first. So we got Indians, and in Canada, it was the Chinese. Now, you can see how the Chinese, it will be worth to note that the new standard gauge railway Kenya has built in recent years, I think that was 10 years ago, it was built by the Chinese. So the Chinese have been at it. And this also raises my point I've been raising here on capacity building. Like these guys, they keep on building capacity, Because if you look, when the railroad in Kenya was built, it was in 1895. And fast forward to the year 2010, and you still find, like, Kenya, we had not yet mastered the art of building rail. This is where I'm saying, we take too long. In fact, the Kenya rail, by the time we were building the new standard gauge rail, it was collapsing. It was collapsing under serious debt. Now, I want you leave Kenya, come to Canada. Let us see what are they doing with their rail line. They not only have expanded to different provinces, but they are even now modernizing. Their rail system is thriving. And that is on just the federal level. When you go to the provinces as well, they also have their own rail system. And now we go lower from the province, we go into the cities or the municipalities. They also have, some of them have the rail system. And this is where now you see, sometimes Africa countries, we drop the ball. I may not say much about, some countries like South Africa, we see them. They have had their transit system and their rail is still working perfectly. Other countries like Morocco, you see them, they're still doing good. But for a society to function, every country needs to have a functioning transit system. And these transit systems should be run by government, or it should be a partnership of the government and the private sector. Government, mostly, it comes in when it matters administration. Why? Because in some instances where we don't have, where public transit systems has been taken over by the private sector. I'll give a case like in Kenya. Sometimes the buses or the bus operators, sometimes they go rogue. You have serious accidents, carnage on the road, or reckless driving because sometimes the private sector cannot regulate themselves. But before I get I get ahead of myself, why not just go into these different cities and see for yourself? Let's start with the cities. I will highlight just 3 cities: Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. Now, Vancouver is the largest city on the western side of Canada. It is in a province called British Columbia. It's very beautiful. Has breathtaking sceneries. Now, in Vancouver, the kind of rail they have also a very unique rail system there that serves the city. It's called the Sky Train. Oh, you will need to Google that to see it for yourself. It is like on a freeway. You see, like in Kenya, we have the expressway. Now imagine that long bridge, that overhead road, having rail, and with different stops, wherever it stops, now you have stairs or elevators or lifts where people get on and off. Then we go to Montreal. In Montreal, they have the subway system and also the buses. Same as Vancouver too, they have buses as well. And in Montreal, their subway systems are also some of the very deep, some of the deepest in the world. Some go as low as, as more than 5-story, like a 5-story houses deep, you can imagine. And they are also very unique because you can imagine a train that has rubber wheels. Yeah, so you had it right. Like these subway systems, they have rubber wheels, and they say because of that, they are some of the smoothest train rides in the world. Well, this is because they took design from France. So you need to note, like Montreal is in a province called Quebec, and Quebec, they are French speakers. They lean sometimes more to the French side. Now, finally, I'll bring you to the TTC, Toronto Transit Commission. Here, we have the subway. And then the subway system, it also works hand in hand with the bus system. And then as well as what we call the streetcars. And last but not least, we have the wheel trans systems. These ones are buses or small vans that are for senior residents and for people who have special needs, like on wheelchairs. So it helps to maneuver them. So let's start with the subway. Well, you see, the Toronto subway, it's more like it's U-shaped, and then at the middle of the U, you have a line crossing from east to the west. So it looks more like, let's say, like an inverted A, but an A that looks more like an N, like or a U. Yeah, it looks like a U that has a dash, from end to end. And this subway system, the unique thing about it is that it manages to save a lot of space, and it helps to move people, with less disturbance, because once it's a subway, people go under, it will not interfere. It just moves smoothly. The transit, the city transit, works in a symbiotic relations. Now, you have the buses running to and fro from the station, from the subway station, and to the inner parts of the city or outer skirts of, into the neighborhoods where you have maybe the passengers living or where the passengers go to work. And then at the same time, these passengers, they'll come back into the subway and then they will ride off again, maybe to another point of a subway and get off. So now there are three levels of transit systems, as I've mentioned. The federal, that is the national government owned transit system. There is a provincially owned transit system, and the municipality owned transit system. These are intertwined into service. You see, each level of government in Canada has a minister for transportation. Federally, we have the Minister of Transportation, who is in charge of the nationwide Canada rail system and infrastructure. And provincially, the same thing. You have a Minister of Transportation in charge of infrastructure within the province, their respective provinces. And when you go on a lower level to the municipal level, they still have a minister for transportation in charge of the infrastructure and the transit system within their cities or municipalities. You see, all these dockets, they earn their respective governments an income, and they serve the residents of that particular locality or within the certain borders that the residents want to go. This is why when you look at some dockets, like from where I'm from, like let's say in Kenya, it's a minister is there for transportation. We have already a collapsed public transit system whereby the bus industry is in the hands of the private sector. This denies the government much needed income or revenue streams. Why do I say that? The system there, the bus system, is a bit rather chaotic. Yes, they may have had circles now, but there's no way to account how much of the revenue they collect is actually, put into, accountability, into account, and how much, tax do they remit back to government. But here, if you look federally, they own the Canadian rail. This is the one that take charge of moving of or shipping of goods from province to province and even all the way to the ports, or from the ports, when we have imports, and bring it back to the industries in Canada. Now, if we go on a lower level, which isn't provincially, now I can talk about Ontario. We have the Metrolink system, which is owned by the province. So this serves the cities within the province. So here we have, you see it is a green bus, it's called the Go bus, and it works hand in hand with a train known as the Go train. Now, if we go a rank lower to the municipalities and different cities within Ontario, you will find that I have highlighted 4 such cities. We have Toronto, which has the Toronto Transit Commission. it has both, it has a rail, the two rails, which one is the subway, is quite an expensive infrastructure. The other one is usually the street cars. So the street cars, you see them on the roads, they have the rail running side by side with car traffic. And then you also have the buses. The buses usually for general population, and the other special buses for people with special needs, we call it the wheel transit. So usually that serves people with special needs with wheelchairs and senior residents, and it goes an extra step because it's a smaller bus. It goes an extra step. It can collect them or pick them from their houses and drop them, maybe when they have special requests, maybe drop them straight at the doorstep of a hospital or old people's home. Something the buses cannot do because you'd see that is general population and the buses are usually very huge. Now, the next city would be Markham. They have the blue bus. And this usually borders, it borders Toronto. And sometimes if you work maybe in Toronto and you live in Markham, you will take that bus from Markham and maybe it will drop you at the border of Markham and Toronto. And you have to pay an extra fare to go into Toronto. So this is how these buses work, and this is how the municipalities also work. So now, on the western side of Toronto, the border of Toronto, there is a city called Mississauga. So they also have their transit system. They call it MyWay, M-I, and then Way, W-A-Y. So these now borders is a Toronto and Mississauga. The same thing happens. And sometimes the cities, they can have an agreement that, we can let your buses just come into our territory, but just to drop the people who maybe are coming from outside, who live in your city, so that they don't have to pay fare twice, because that is also very expensive. So they may have some agreement. The other city you will see is that there's one that borders Toronto to the northwest. It's called Brampton. So now Brampton as well, they have their buses. They are called the Zoom bus, Z-U-M. And so they can also come into Toronto's territory, but just maybe to drop passengers, maybe at the main subway, but at main subway in Vaughan. That is the most northern subway station from Toronto. So it usually like it's a terminal city on the most northern side of Toronto. Usually the provincial buses are more like more express. They don't stop like the local buses. So if you want to go to a different city, you just take the provincial bus, or the provincial bus, the GO bus, or the provincial train, like the GO train. And their stops are usually fewer because they are moving from major towns to major towns, or from major towns to cities. And if you want to travel within the country on rail, now that is a system owned by the federal government. They call it the Via Rail. So the Via Rail system, now you can go from city to city. Take from Montreal, you go to Ottawa. You can also come to Toronto. From Toronto, maybe you want to go to Vancouver. That's quite a huge distance. I was talking to a friend of mine. He had taken the train from Vancouver to Toronto, and because of the long distance, it's 4,500 kilometers almost. They had to travel for 5 days. 5 days, I think 5 days, 4 nights. So you can imagine. So he was telling me by the time you get in on that train, you are there on your own. But by the time you hit that day, you've already known everyone on the on the train. By the time you get to Toronto, you have already made friends for life. I found it very hilarious. The other important aspect is the working conditions and maybe the job itself. You see, if you are in Kenya and you are a bus driver, if you work for a big company, maybe they have a pension system. Maybe they have a way they can give you leave. They can give you leave, maybe paternal leave, or you have some emergency or a sick leave, because it's a big company. On the other hand, maybe even they can cater for your health insurance. But I usually feel sorry for those bus drivers, or the taxi, you call them a taxi, the minibus drivers, who have to work throughout their lives, no pension, no nothing. You usually wonder, when they grow old, where do they go? Because you have to work, I think, and you work to the bone. Even when you are old, you still can't afford to miss work, because if you do not work, you don't get paid. So these are the aspects that make me, now you see, when I raise these points, you want to see where I'm coming from, because you have to mind the welfare of the citizens. You are giving the public good service because you are moving them. You are making the country move, because that is the work of transportation. But at the end of it all, how do you benefit from this if you did not get a good pension system? The system is broken. Maybe the owner of the bus did not put you there for pension. They did not put the health insurance. They did not pay the health insurance, the National Health Insurance Fund. So these are the few things that come into mind. Because if some things can be run maybe by government, then we would not have an aging population that has no pension. On the other hand, you see, the government now, when they invest in infrastructure, they will know specifically what they are investing in, because they can always they'll always get direct feedback from their workers. But now, if you're a minister in charge of transportation and you have no driver, the only driver you have are for members of parliament, for judges, those are the only ones you're talking to. But you never know if they get direct feedback about public transportation or how hard it is, how good it is. You never get any right feedback, because you are operating on what we call like remote control. You're just watching things as they unravel. You always go, if it's an accident, that is when you are running to do what we call knee-jerk reactions, crackdowns. For instance, when conductors misbehave or a passenger does not have enough fare, we have seen it in Kenya, a young man being thrown out from a moving bus and they die. Or a woman who did not have enough fare has been thrown out of a moving bus and only to be hit by another bus that was following and died. And now we have knee-jerk reactions because, you detain the whole fleet and you say all of them need to go to inspection. But that is not how it should be. Here in Toronto, if you do not pay fare, or any other municipality, there are supervisors for those buses, and they will always demand for proof of payment. That is what they call it. If you do not pay, there's very hefty fines, and it can also go onto your record that you have refused to pay. So these are some of the things that we need to look at, because Transportation industry is a huge employer. If we want to empower our people, these are some of the things that we need to do so that everyone can live a dignified life, and that the people who are doing it, you know, they are adding value to society. And this is why I make this program, Vitu Vidogo, because you see, when we collapse such industries like transportation and others, what replaces them, they are just but makeshifts. They are just but shadows of what we should have had in the first place. And when all these revenues is lost, guess what? The government on this next budget, all they do is just raise taxes. And when they raise these taxes and give no services, then the people feel like this is an oppressive, is just counterproductive. So if you want to raise more money or more revenues, then it has to go hand in hand with the services that you give. What do you think? Subscribe and leave a comment. And then last but not least, when you have a functioning transit system, we standardize how transport should be done in the country. We will standardize the buses. We will standardize, even the infrastructure, how it's laid, because now the ministry will always put into consideration how the roads design should be, because they'll be the one investing in this infrastructure. They can say, if you want to tender on a road, these are the specifications that we need on these roads. The bus stops, the shades, all these things. The other thing would be, they would have is a great employer, the mechanics on the buses. Not just even the assembly lines on the bus, but even the garages all over the country. All these young men and women who are being trained in these technical colleges, at least they would have a place to go, and that they will be enabled to serve their country. This is a huge, 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 huge deal. When it comes to revenue collection, you see, here in Canada, all these transit systems, they have a system to collect revenue. And you take a card, they will give you a card. Before then, Toronto had its own card system, and and all other municipalities around us had a different transit card. But with time, I think was last year, that's when they merged as the same system of collecting money. And it made it easier, because before then you'd have to have a card for Toronto and then you'd have a card for the other place. So now, with one card, what you do with that card, you load it fare, and then you use it. You can load it for weekly, or you can load it for monthly. So that is how now the government collects money directly. It's from the collections now that the government now will see they are earning a profit. Are you seeing now what I'm talking? Like serious investment. The government earns a profit. They can plow back the profit and get new buses. Like for instance, when I came in, there were just the diesel buses, and then they upgraded to hybrid buses, and now I'm seeing we have electric buses. Why? Because the government has more revenue, and then it has money that it can plow back into itself, and then they also use their resources to train the drivers. I see them They go, I see them sometimes on the road, they have the training bus, they train the drivers. They would not just because you have a license that they will allow you to go on the road. So when they train the drivers, then again, they instill some discipline because they expect their drivers to behave in a certain way. So it's it's something that is should be embraced. It's when we are talking about public transit system, if we want to transform our Africa, you know, these are some of the things that we really need to look at. Don't let just, it will, anything goes where it will go. That mentality, that attitude, then that does not fix anything. It's like planting, you want to plant, whatever seed, maybe, let's say you want to beans, and then what you go to the shop, whatever seed you get, you throw it in there, and you're expecting to harvest beans, and then out comes cabbages, that's, and then you'll be like, okay, it's good enough. It's not good enough. That's not what you wanted. So let's look for solutions that are going to last, and solutions that, will also cater to the high unemployment in our country. Other revenue streams on the public transit are on adverts. If you look at the bus stands or the bus sheds, you'll see adverts. Sometimes on the buses, you on the backs, on the side of the bus, on the outside, or on the side of the streetcars, you will see adverts. Inside the buses, you will see adverts. On the walls of the subway as well, you will see more adverts. These are more avenues where the city collects revenue directly. And it's also a good way to sensitize customers or citizens, or what we call, like in Toronto, they call the citizens the Torontonians. So the Torontonians are made more aware of many things. Could be an outbreak of maybe a disease. For instance, now there's measles. There's an outbreak of measles. So people are being made aware, or maybe when seasons change, like from coming on from a warm weather like autumn, we're going into winter. So we have the flu season. That is the time they also make more adverts to sensitize the public on matters health, and maybe wearing a mask or something like that. So there are many more avenues the city collects revenue. It's not just on transit. The other thing you will notice is artists are also given platforms on these trains, but they are required to register with the city so that they can perform on these platforms. So for a small fee, they will be given a place, maybe, and a time to play. And citizens who are using these services, the transit system, sometimes if they feel generous enough, or sufficiently philanthropic, in the words of former Speaker of National Assembly, Kenneth Marende, well, they can tip, they can give tips to these performing artists. And this is also a nice way, we don't let the arts die, because these performances, they bring to life the culture that is in Toronto, or the culture that is all those cities that offer public transit. As I conclude, I would like you to see how interdependent the transit system here in Canada is. This, you will witness it at the Union Station. That is where all the transit lines meet. So there you have the subway, it will be under. And then once you get off the subway, you go upstairs. on another level, and then to the ground level. That is where now you will see the other, the provincial train, the metro link system, that is the GO train. And you shall also see the federal owned train, the Via Rail Canada. So you can see how easy it is to travel within the country, because they have really planned out, is a well thought out and planned system. You can come from wherever, maybe the farthest part of Canada on rail, and you still find yourself going home all on public system. Isn't it wonderful? All of that owned by government. So every time you travel, you are doing your service, the government is giving you service, and hey, and you're going in a dignified way. And the people you are with there are also dignified. So you will see it's usually is a very lovely system. And the government, usually you will see even on the buses and the trains, they always put the signs and say, respect our bus driver, respect, the staff. The same way they will respect you. So they do not, that is why everybody should be on mutual respect. So it's the same thing I would urge even our own drivers back home. If somebody does not have enough fare, please just stop the bus and you can let them go. They would rather walk home and get home alive. Sometimes things happen. You don't have to throw someone out of the bus, young man. You're a bus owner. You don't have to throw a customer out. Today they may not have money, but the next day they will have. Times are tough. Let's be easy on each other. So Vitu Vidogo. These are small things that count. Let's be kind. Let's be nice to each other. And yeah. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. It will be lovely to hear from you on what you think. So we'll try to find other more solutions to, to a small problems. Take care. See you next time.